All right, so recording now. Hi. So keep quiet. Then you won't have to ask me, sir, why can't I hear any audio? All right. So this is Maya's interface. We're gonna go through it really quickly. Essentially, this is a 3D workspace. So whereas you're normally used to seeing your what's the word, X and Y axes, in 3D you're working with 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. X and Y are the ones we're used to. You know, X is horizontal, Y vertical, Z is going to be more about depth. So it will be more towards us or away from us, right? So Maya has quite an extensive set of tools, which you can find everywhere. A few things you need to go through is your what's the word? Your file menu. So you have a menu at the top here, and your menu at the top here will change depending on which set of tools you're using or which workspace you prefer using, or which set of tools. So Maya comes with some default stuff, such as for modeling, rigging, animation, FX, rendering. And you can always customize this stuff. So in the modeling interface, your menu tends to look like this. You have things that have to do with your models, your polygons, surfaces, etc. If you're going to be doing rigging, when it comes to that time, it has things doing with skeleton, skin, deformations, constraints, controls, etc. Animation has something else like keys, playback, visual, deformations, and stuff. If you're doing FX, you're going to have stuff for fluids, end cloth, hair, constraint, cache, field solvers, etc. Right? So right now we're going through the modeling interface. So just a few tools that you need to be familiar with. With every single 3D software, these are tools that these are things you can have to use to manipulate anything. Right? Basic controls. One is selecting your objects. Much like many selection tools that you have out there, the same with Maya, when you're selecting multiple objects, well, we get there. So different tools. Selection tool is one. In Maya on the left side, this is your toolbox, right? Down here is your lasso tool. So that means you can actually create a selection using a lasso. Here is your paint selection tool. You're not seeing. Can you see it? All right.
Not really.
All right. Can you see it now? Let me just pull this over. Oh. Right, we're good. Can you see everything now? Board panels. All right. So, selection tool and something you can look at. You have a little help window down here. Whenever you're hovering over something like a tool, what will happen is that you'll be able to see what that tool does. So select tool, lasso tool, paint selection tool, move tool, rotate tool, and scale tool. Below that, you have a few things that change your workspace and show or hide your outliner, right? All right, so let's start out with something simple. Modeling or creating an object in Maya. There's multiple ways you could do it. One, by using the create button, and you can choose what of many objects you can create, such as your NURBS or your polygons, etc. But for this purpose, we'll just use the simpler stuff. Up here, you have a polygons tab. Right? Under your polygons tab, you have a few basic primitives that they have. 2018 actually has a few more of them, but I'm going to start off with a cube. So when you click on the cube here, it pops up with a cube in what they call 0, 0, 0. That's where the positioning is. So if you look at it in Maya, you actually have a grid here, and the middle of the grid is what they call 0, 0, 0, which is your original point in the world origin point, right? So when I created the tool, over here on the right side in the channel box, it came up with a few things. So this object is called pcube1. So if I actually click on it, you'll see pcube1. I can always double click on this and call it something else. Something else. By default though, when you press spacebar, Maya will add an underscore, right? So this is X and Y and Z. So a few things. One is selecting the object. I'm going to add one more. So I'll create another one and I'll move this. This one is now called P cube 1 because the first one we called something else. Right? So we have two cubes. So if you select one object, object is selected. If you click the other one, it's going to be selected. If you want to select both of them, click on one, hold shift. Right? Much like any other tool. You also have a lasso tool here. Let's see how that works. I'm going to create a lasso here and it selects both objects. Right? So that's a lasso tool, and you also have the paint selection tool where you can actually paint on things to select them. That's when you go into like edit mode or something. All right. So go back to object mode. So I'll delete this now. Now, like I said, basic things you need to be able to do is move things, rotate things, scale things. So move tool is here. You click on it, it comes up with what you call manipulators. That's manipulators for the X, Y, and Z axes. And if you look down here at the bottom left corner, you actually have something that tells you what axes you're looking at. So X would be the one going in that direction, then Z would be the one going in this direction, and Y would be going up. Right? So each object, when you look in the channel box, have things that can be manipulated. So if you want to move on the Y-axis, for example, you can just click on the arrow and move it up. Right? It constrains itself just to that axis. If you want to move on the X-axis, simply pull that. Same with this one. Right? But you notice something else. You also have a few what they call squares here in between two axes. Whenever you select one of these squares, for example, this is a Y-axis and this is an X-axis. When you select this one, it's going to constrain it only to the Y and the X-axis only. Right? Here is going to work with this axis and that axis only. So you can move around on those two axes. This one, the same. You can always work with those. And you'll notice that while I'm moving stuff, if you look in the translate properties in the channel box, you see them being edited. That means that for each object, you can always reset the positions by simply pressing 0 on each of them. And just go back to its original position. Right? Okie dokie. Now, besides moving, you also have rotation. And you'll see that rotation has a different set of manipulators. You can actually select different things you can manipulate with. For example, I'm selecting the object. I can rotate along this axis here, which is the Z axis. Notice it's blue, just like this blue one here. X is here, so it rotates along the X axis itself, and Y is around here. So it's rotating around that particular axis. Y, X, Z. Right? Now, about the axes, if you're confused, they're actually color coded. X-axis tends to be red, Y-axis tends to be green, Z-axis tends to be blue in Maya. Depending on the 3D software you use, it might be different, right? Okay, so that's the rotating part. You can rotate along different axes. Now you always have, for rotation, a blue ring that goes around everything. This rotates according to your view, your current view. So right now I haven't actually moved my view, but I can hold Alt and click and just move around the view, and I can rotate according to my view. So if I want to rotate around the view, I can always choose the outermost ring. Right? Click. Yes. So what you select is gonna be there. So that's X, Y, and Z. Not only can you select based on your current view using this blue ring, but you can actually click anywhere in this area. Notice I have a very dull black circle here. You can actually select this and do what they call like a trackball rotation. So you can just click on it and just rotate around as though you were using a trackball to rotate it. Right? So that's different ways you can rotate things. And if you look over here, again, if you rotate things, the properties over here are going to change. Make sense? Right? Next, let's just reset these. These I'm going to highlight all of them. Highlight these. I don't see a reset, so I'm just going to change them to 0. Alright, so that resets it. Now the next part is scaling. Scaling, giving your objects the ability to become bigger or smaller. Very simple. That's the scale tool. Right? Now you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 cubes and 3 squares. The cube in the middle, it's going to scale based on your pivot point. So if I highlight that and just pull and drag, it's going to start scaling evenly. Right? If, however, I choose one of these, it scales on that particular axis. Notice? Or this, I can scale on that axis. Now sometimes you might be scaling, rotating, or moving, and the figures might move a little too fast. You can actually click on it and hold CTRL and get them to be more precise in measurement. So CTRL is a thing. You can actually hit CTRL, or in your case, for those of you who use Macs, Command, and it will scale accordingly. Right? And if you look here now as well, I'm going to reset this again. 0, 0, 0. Oh, I'm sorry, that should be 1. 1, 1, 1. Right. So when it comes to scaling, and I'll press F to focus on my object, you have these as well. Much like when we were using movement a while ago, or move, what happens in this case is that this is our Y and this is our X, right? Right? So if you have Y and X in between it, you can actually scale constraining only to those two axes, X and Y. So if I pull this, I do that. If I do this, it goes on those two axes. So you wanted something really flat, and you know it's scaling only on that flat axis, that axis right there, you can do that. And over here, if you want to be scaled up on those two axes, you can always pull those. Make sense, guys? You can say, you know, yeah. It'll look weird in the YouTube video when I'm like asking questions. There's absolutely nobody talking. All right, so those are the scale, rotation, and move, as well as the selection tools. There's one more thing though. Sometimes it can be annoying. You have to go over here and click, and go over here, click, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. For these tools, in terms of scale, rotate, and move, and selecting, the shortcuts are, for selection tool, it's Q, and you can see my cursor changes to an arrow. If I click on it, I can select that object. If you want to move something, W. If you want to rotate, it's E, and if you want to scale, it's R. Right? So just like we have a QWERTY keyboard, QWERT or QWER are the shortcuts for doing the major things that you're pretty much going to be doing. If for any reason at all you select an object and you're like, oh no, I'd like to focus on that object, you can simply press F to focus. F. Right? Yeah. Alright. So channel box allows you to manipulate your attributes of your object, as well as certain other things. Right? So that's the first part, just moving things around and rotating things. There's another part as well. So all this time we've been working in what they call perspective view, right? And perspective view is good, but sometimes you want to see what's going on at the top or the side, or you know. So
because sometimes the perspective view is cool from the front, and when you're on the side, it looks like someone is trying to play a cat.
Yes. So you want to be sure that you have access to all sides. So you can simply hit spacebar. Just whoa. Apologies. So if you hit spacebar, it gives you the four-sided, the four window view, right? So you can see top view, front view, side view, and perspective, right? If you need to go to any one of these views, just hover your mouse over it and press spacebar. Same thing. See, I can always go to any view I choose, depending on what I want. All right. And you can also access this 4-window thing just by clicking on this, or just clicking on that. Or if you want just 2 windows, click on that one. and you get 2 windows. Something to note as well, they're not only just preset views you can look at, but you can also create your own views. Yeah. All right. So here's that and that. So that's how you do those things. Now I had mentioned something else, that when it comes to like a channel view, you have a few more things that you can actually edit out of it. So if you look at this cube here, it's just a regular cube, right? And something also noteworthy for any 3D object. 3D objects are made up of 3 things. Sometimes 4, depending. Right? 1, 3D objects are made up of faces. Or 3D polygons are made up of faces. So if I right click on this and choose this face, it will be everything that's selected here. So that's one face. So a cube has how many faces?
1, 2, 3, 4,
6 faces, right? Alright, cool. We also have edges. That's be the line that joins 2 points. So we have a few edges here. How many edges do you think a cube has? 12? Yeah, sure.
No.
8? Why don't you count? Yeah, you could count, or we could just actually display what we have. I have heads-up display as well, and you can choose object details. Oh wait, this one doesn't have it. Let's take off that heads-up display. That and display heads-up polycount. Alright, cool. So in this particular object, we have, as you said, it was 12 edges, 6 faces, and 8 vertices. The vertices are the points though. So if I choose vertex, it's that single point. That's a vertex. And just like you can with an entire object, you can actually manipulate your vertices. So you can always move things around. Or if you want to choose edges, you can click on those and scale them if you want to. And that's how you manipulate your objects, essentially. Right? So you can do things like those. So it really depends on what you want to do. When it comes to 3D, just imagine you doing something in the real world, and once you kind of understand it from a concept like that, then you shouldn't be able to have any issues manipulating anything. So here's what I want you to try to do. I want you to try just doing a few things. 1, get used to rotating around the object. So hold Alt and simply click on the scene and just rotate around the object, you know, top and bottom, just rotate, you know, just get used to it. And zoom in and zoom out, right? For those of you who don't have mice, use mice. Trackpads are terrible for this thing, right? Right, so I have my object there. I'm just gonna undo what I did. Leave it as a cube. So just get used to rotating around the object. You know, going to the right of it, left of it, etc. Going above it and below it. Going around it. Now besides rotating, once you get used to rotating around the scene, so that's holding Alt and just clicking, that allows you to do that. You can always focus around your, so if you want to focus on your object, like I said, what's the shortcut? F for focusing. Right? So if you want to pan across the object, panning means to move it, you know, not that way, but this way. That would be holding Alt and middle mouse click and just drag. Middle mouse click and drag. So you can actually pan across. Middle mouse click, just pan across. Just get used to panning, guys. Panning. And pan. And pan. And rotate. And focus. And pan. And F to focus. right? So that's panning and rotation. What about zooming in and zooming out? Well, there's two ways. You could always just mouse wheel up and mouse wheel down. If you're used to using Windows where mouse wheel up would give you a zooming in and mouse wheel down gives you zoom out, you might have to change the Mac settings because Mac does it inversely, and you can always go into the settings and change the properties so that you can manipulate it however you want to, right? So mouse wheel and up and down, and the other way is holding Alt, right clicking and dragging. Well, right click and hover in a sense, like this. So I can always zoom into an object or zoom out, but mouse wheel in and out, up and down is probably easier. But if you don't have a 3-button mouse, most people do these days, you can hold Alt, left and right click, sorry, and just carry it out and in. Right? So pop quiz. How do you focus again? And how do you zoom in?
That scrolly thing in the bit on the mouse.
What? Yeah, the mouse wheel. Up and down. If you want to pan, what's the shortcut?
Alt. Middle button.
Middle button and Alt. Well done. Well done. Alright, cool. So let me just tell you how I got this up. This is what you call a heads-up display. Maya has quite a few of them actually. But you can actually access this by going in display at the top here. Look at heads-up display, and if you want to see things like object details or any other thing, you can always just open it up on the heads-up display. So I had poly count on, and you can unclick that if you don't want to see anything. Yeah. Is it there? Okay. So that part's covered. Right? So if you use basic objects and if you kind of understand it, how to do things, you can actually create something like this. I'm just going to open a scene prepared. Recent files. I have something called a I'm going to open a scene. I have one for so here's a castle. It's kind of more than the castle we did last time, right? If you notice it, it's actually made up of very simple objects. I can actually show you how to recreate this really quickly right now, and I think I will. Right, just really quickly. So this is our castle, and I'm just gonna pan across here. Actually, what I'll do is highlight everything. I won't hide it. I'm just gonna group it first. I'm gonna also, once this is selected as a group, it's a group right now. What I can do, and this is something you can use for organization or organizing things that you have. If you look right over here on the right side, just at the bottom, you have what you call your layer editor. It kind of falls in the same category with the channel box. So layer editor allows you to actually create a layer based on what you have selected, or you can add things to your layer, or you can create a new layer or move things. So I'm going to click on this one here. It says create a new layer and assign selected objects. So everything is selected. So I'm going to click on this, and that's layer 1. I'm just going to change the color to something red. And I'll call this original castle. This don't have any somewhere though, underscore. So save. Alright, cool. White space. So we need an underscore here. And press save. Once I actually have a layer there, my objects in that particular layer are going to be the same color as this here. So if I want to be green or white, and I save it, whenever I do a selection, it's going to be like that. But let's say I don't want to see this layer, right? And let me tell you how layers work in 3D. Layers work like this. It doesn't work like your 2D layers. So it's not like you know, this layer is on top of that layer is on top of that layer. In 3D, layers work more for organization than anything else, right? So I can always hide this layer by pressing, you will see something here that says V and P. V means visibility. Click on that, it'll be invisible, right? So let's get started on our castle again. Well, let me show you what it's made of. Let's look at a few things. One, you have a plane right here. You have a cylinder here. You have a cone here. You have a pyramid looking thing here. And you have another cone here and another plane there. So it's just about rotating and scaling and moving things around. So I'll hide this one. We'll create our first object, which is the plane. Click on that plane. And what I'll do, if you look on that plane, I'm going to scale that plane. So I press R to scale, or you can just come over here to the scale tool and just scale it out like this. Right, that's my scale. Right there. That's fine, right? Next one, let's get a cube in the mix. Bam, cube. So I kind of want everything to be settled on the floor, because right now the way I have things, if I press spacebar, what I'm going to see is just that. I kind of want to see it from a side view, and I want to see what my plane is doing. So I know my plane is resting on this darkest line here, and I kind of want everything there. So I'm going to go here, 1, no, not it does. So that's 1. Doesn't look quite flat enough, does it? What do you think would be the best thing to do in this particular point? I kind of want to flatten it out. Scale on which one? Scale on Y, yeah. What if I want to be bigger? On both Z and X. Yeah. I'll just pull on this one. Yeah. And I can probably just let this go up a little bit more. Nice. So I know it's resting on there, or at least I think it's resting on there. And that's good enough for me right now. Let's zoom out a bit. I'm going to create a cone. Not a cone, sorry. I'm going to create a cylinder. And by default, whenever you create anything in 3D, what's going to happen is that it's going to be created in the center of the world at 0, 0, 0. So I need to pull that out. So I'm going to go in the top view. That's this one. And I kind of want everything to line up on a point here.
Using wireframe.
So this is a wireframe view. And I can do this and do that. Now let's say you want to snap exactly there. You can hold V and it will snap to the vertices.
Oh.
If you hold V, snaps to vertices. When you move it, it snaps towards a vertex or an edge or a vertices. So that's it. Bam. Stick onto that thing. And that works for me. I'll go back into 3D view. That's right there. But it's not resting quite where I want it to go. I kind of want this to be taller. So I'll scale it up a little bit first. But then I'll scale it up on the Y-axis. That gives me the height I want. Then I'm going to move it up like so. Move it up just slightly more. And do this. There we go. Still a little floaty, right? So I'm going to do this and hold CTRL just to get the perfectness. Right, so that works for me. Now here's a question. Which do you think is the best method? To do all the cylinders first, then do all the cones first? Or do a cone and a cylinder once and then just copy it and paste it all around? Copy and paste, right? So you're trying to be as efficient as you can. So I'm taking this out of wireframe view, which is this little button here. And I have that view right there. I'll take it out of this as well, and that. And that. So this one is nice. And then we'll just take a cone here. One cone. And like I said, everything is gonna be on that particular axis. So I'm gonna scale it out like so. Let's just make sure everything lines up properly. So back into wireframe view so I can see it a little more clearly or less clearly. And then I'll go into top view just to make sure everything lines up. So I'm going to hold V and move this towards the center. Right? And I'll scale it out using the scale tool. That'll be this one. Right? So let's go back into our views, back to 3D view. And let's make sure that this actually is pointing up like so. I'll make it slightly bigger. Like so. So that's one thing. Viewport. So you can kind of see what it looks like. That's fine, right? Yes, no, yes. Maybe so. So let's click on these two. And how do you select multiple objects? You hold shift while selecting one. Right? So all I just need to do is this. One, I can group it by pressing Ctrl-G or Command-G, depending on if you're using a Mac or not. Right? Items grouped successfully. What I'll do next is I'm going to move the center of this group, not at the center of the world, but I'll move it towards the center of this thing. Back into wireframe view again. Top view. So I'm going to hold D and V at the same time.
So I move it to the center.
Why? Why does it move to the center? By default it does. Oh, why? Because this is where my objects are. And the thing about groups is, and I'll open up my outliner here. Whenever you create a group, and I have several, this is the group I just created a while ago.
So it's like you make a next view. Each center to the right.
So groups have different centers from objects themselves. Right? So you might want to move a group, but notice my center right now at the top. My center is at the top right here. If I choose to rotate, it's going to rotate around that center. Right? So it's important to know where the center is. So like for the robot exercise that you get, you have to move your joints in the right center so that when it comes to like doing things like moving hands or claws, then you'll be able to do that really easily rather than having to struggle and
That's D.
Yeah, D moves the center or the pivot point. So if you hold D, you can always just move things around. If you hold D and V at the same time, D will move it, but V will snap it to the vertex. Because V already snaps it. Right? And like I said, for all intents and purposes, we're actually recording right now. So, nice. So once we have this, I'm going to select the group. And I'm just going to move the top, the vertex at the top to the bottom. Oh no.
So I move it to the bottom.
Why? Because that's the base of the object is. Bam. There we go. So now, if I want to scale, it'll scale from there. If I want to rotate, it rotates from there. Right? That's why we move the pivot point to the base. Because if you think of any 3D show you watch where somebody shrinks or grows, they always shrink from their feet. Right? You'd be kind of worried if they shrank from the middle of them. And then, their whole body went through the floor. And then they just got up again. Right? So that's one. So to duplicate, really easy. There's two duplications you have. We just use Ctrl-D. Control-D is one. And I'll just move this out here. And just kind of just try to snap it right here. 1, V, click. So bam, that's there. Press Ctrl-D again. And all I need to do is this. V and snap it towards there. Ctrl-D again. V and just snap it towards that. And that is done. See? Very simple. There is only one more part. I'm just going to take this cube here, duplicate it, move it up, scale it down, like so. Can I probably just pull it in like this? And I'm going to rotate it about 90 degrees, 45 degrees, sorry. So my rotation is going to be along the y-axis. So think of like you have a stick that goes out on the y-axis and you're throwing a ring in there. That ring is how it's going to rotate around. The what? Sorry? I can't hear you.
Your cube is floating.
Oh yes, sorry. Thank you for noting. Yes. My cube is floating, so that's a thing. Thank you, Janelle. Oh no, no, YouTube knows who you are. I have to bleep out that section. Alright. So we're gonna rotate on the y-axis again. 45 degrees if you want to be specific. That. Ta-da! And what we want to do is create a kind of like a pyramid shape. This is where Norman says Illuminati confirmed. Alright, so what we want to do is create a pyramid shape. Now, if you look up here, there is something for a polygon pyramid. So I'm going to click on that. What it does, it creates for me a pyramid. So we just need to scale that up. And look at that, it fits quite naturally. If it's too, how do you say?
Zoom out on your side so you can see the side view, side view.
This one?
No, side. That one. Yeah. Zoom out. Yeah, it's perfect.
Alright, so that's how that works. Orthographic views cannot be tumbled, so you can't use alt on orthographic views, just to let you know. And the last thing we need now is something that sticks out like a little castle, a little flag thing. So what I'll do is take a cylinder. You can use a cylinder if you want to. I'll make this a little taller, pull this up. That's too large. And we'll just scale that in. Make this taller, scale that in. Or if you want to just make that twig, just scale along this particular axis. It'll just thin it out. And then all we need now is a plane. Plane currently looks flat like this. So we just rotate it along which axis you think? Let me scale it up and show you. Which axis would we need to use? Y-axis, rotate on the y-axis? You sure? X-axis? You sure?
Where is the Y, sir?
Is Z. 90 degrees. So then you have that shape. From the castle, not a fart. Alright, scale that down. And ta-da! Just a simple flag. Bonus thing, if you want to add color to this, Maya makes it very easy. Somewhat. Simply, I'm just going to click on this shape, that shape, this shape. Right click on this shape. Right click, and you have something that says assign new material. Once you do that, you have to choose a type of material because Maya has different materials. For now, because I don't want too much details, I'm just going to select Lambert or Blinn. And from here, you'll notice something opens up now, your attribute editor. This also contains information about the object selected, but for the Blinn, what I can do is choose the color and I'll just make it red. So it assigns that material to all those objects. And that's it for your castle though. So let's compare the castles, shall we? That's one castle and the other one.
That one is prettier.
Where we had. So we have two of them.
No, you cheated. This feels like a pain, Mario. I'm trying to get in that castle in the back.
Alright, so that's the castle. That's really easy. Last thing we're going to do before we actually move on to what we're supposed to do today. Like I said, this is just the overview part. I'm going to show you how to build that dice again.
Okay.
It's only 10 steps, so it's not that long. Right, so I'm going to start this. And also give you one more tip when it comes to doing anything in Maya is setting your project up. Because if you don't set your project up, chances are you might lose some. That's outside of if you don't save. Right? So I don't need to save this because my castle is already done. But for the sake of it's just, I mustn't save it, save scene. Yeah. So here's how we start. One, I'm going to create a new scene. Right? That means I have a different Maya document. So if you create a new scene, by the way, your previous Maya document will close.
Okay.
Right? So for this now, whenever you're creating a project in Maya, and let me just stop the first recording so this can be a second part. So